My name is Layla. I was born in Kabul, in a house full of books, but empty of dreams. My father was a teacher, my mother a nurse. They taught me to study hard, to be quiet, to survive. But I was never quiet. I wrote poems in the margins of my notebooks. I wrote about rain and birds and things I didn't yet understand, like freedom. I met Zia on a cold winter morning. He was standing outside a small newspaper office, holding a camera and a cup of tea. He smiled and asked if I was the girl who sent poems to the newspaper. I nodded. He said, "Your words sound like wings trying to break a cage." That was the first time someone understood me. From that day, Zia became my biggest reader and my first love. We spent many evenings on the rooftop of his office, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. He told me stories of people who risked their lives for truth. I told him I was afraid of losing mine for words. He said, "If your words can change even one heart, it's worth it." I didn't know then that he meant his own heart. He began publishing my poems every week in his column called Voice of the Silent. The city started to whisper my name. Girls wrote letters to thank me. Some men sent warnings. Zia laughed at the threats. "Words are not bullets," he said. But in our country, sometimes they are. One night, he gave me a small notebook, plain, brown, with rough paper. "For your next book," he said, "write about light, even if you are standing in the dark." I smiled and wrote on the first page, "For Zia, who sees me." Then came the protests. It was spring, the air thick with dust and anger. People filled the streets with banners and hope. Zia was there, camera in hand, shouting for justice. I begged him not to go. He kissed my forehead and said, "Someone has to tell the truth." I stayed home, holding the notebook he had given me, and prayed for his safety. Hours later, I heard the explosion. The news said a gunman opened fire. My phone rang. It was his friend's voice, trembling. "Layla, Zia is gone." I ran through the streets barefoot, not feeling the stones cutting my feet. When I reached the hospital, it was too late. His hand was cold. His shirt was stained red. The notebook, my notebook, was found in his pocket. The last page was torn and soaked with blood. There were only 3 words written in his handwriting. "Keep writing, Layla." I buried that notebook with him, but one page remained, the one with his blood. I pressed it between the pages of my new book. Every time I looked at it, the red mark seemed alive, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Days turned into months. The world went on, but mine stood still. I stopped writing. I couldn't. Every word reminded me of him, but silence hurt even more. One night, I opened my drawer and found his old articles. Stories of people who never gave up. I realized he wanted me to be one of them. So I wrote again. I wrote about Zia, about love, about loss, about how a pen can bleed like a wound. The poems poured out of me like rain after a long drought. When my first book was published, people said it felt alive. They called me a poet of pain. But I knew the truth. I was only the messenger. The real poet was gone. But his ink was red, and it still spoke. Now, when I stand on stage, I always carry that one stained page with me. I read his name softly before I start. People clap for me, but I know the applause belongs to him. Because every poem I write is signed not with my name, but with the mark of his blood. I visit his grave every year on the same day he died. I bring a fresh notebook and leave it there. I whisper, "I kept writing, Zia." And in the silence that follows, I almost hear him reply. Not in words, but in the wind that moves through the trees, carrying the scent of ink and memory. Some say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time only teaches you how to live with a broken heart. My heart still bleeds, but it bleeds in rhythm, like a poem. I am Layla, and I am still writing. But the truth is, I am only continuing what he started. Zia wrote the first line of my life, and I am writing the rest, with his blood as my ink. Because love never dies. It only changes its form. From touch to memory to words that refuse to fade. And somewhere beyond this world, I know he is still reading my poems.